Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We're so thrilled to invite all of you to our fourth episode of Morning Book Buzz. And as you all know, it's National Library Week. And so we thought we had to do something really special for all of you. We've been so thrilled you've tuned in every week for the last 4 weeks now. And so we thought, what can we do this week for National Library Week? And of course, the answer was, let's invite some of our incredible authors. So we are so very lucky today to have a special National Library Week episode of Morning Book Buzz. We hope you brought the coffee because we brought the books and the authors. And again, my name is Jennifer Rubens, and I also have my lovely colleague, Kelly Coyle-Crivelli. Wave hello.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Reminder before we jump into the lovely introductions, the hashtag is PRH Morning Buzz. So please use it. We've loved all the interaction that we've seen from all of you over the past weeks. It's brought us a lot of joy, and we hope that you use it again today. And I think I'm just making sure everyone can hear me. Everyone's unmuted themselves, I hope, on our lovely panel. And let's go ahead and introduce our fantastic authors. So today we have, and I think we'll go in the order of the slide. Go ahead and please introduce yourself and also say where you are calling from.
I am Rufi Thorpe, and this is my third novel, The Knockout Queen, is coming out. And I am calling from my children's room in Southern California, in LA. And there's a turtle behind me. Maybe he'll excitingly jump into the water and startle us all at some point.
Oh, we should have added him to the slide as a special guest. What's your turtle's name?
Fred.
Oh, Fred.
Yes,
I love it.
I am Samantha Downing. I wrote My Lovely Wife, and he started it, and I am in New Orleans. I'm in my French Quarter apartment, which is why it looks so old, sitting behind those wall behind me. It's so old. And,
I love the brick.
That's it.
Ellen?
Yeah, I'm Ellen Marie Wiseman, and this is my fifth book, The Orphan Collector, and I'm calling from northern New York, up by the St. Lawrence River.
Hi, well, thank you. I love knowing that we're all connecting from so many different places across the country. It's just really amazing. I think one of the joys that's come out of this difficult time has been things like this. So thank you for joining us, and thanks to everyone calling in for joining us. I see hello from Long Island and so many other places around. Thanks for chatting. We also have a Q&A box on the side, so we do have someone from our team monitoring that. So if you do have questions as we go, feel free to type them in, and we'll try and get back to you. And then if the chat is for just saying hi or saying something that you want everybody to see. So let's jump in and learn about some of these fabulous books, because like we've been talking about so much in the past weeks, books are really connecting us at this time, and we need all the books, and especially the three of yours. We're such fans of all of your work, and we want to hear a little bit more from your perspective about these latest works from you. So let's go to the next slide and start chatting about books. So Rufi, do you want to go first and tell us a little bit about your latest, The Knockout Queen?
So The Knockout Queen is about two best friends, and we sort of start out meeting them in high school, and it's Bunny, who's an athlete and by the end of high school is 6'3", and her next door neighbor, Michael, who is a straight A student and works at Rite Aid after school and has a secret Grindr account. So ultimately, Bunny winds up doing something very much like on impulse before she can think about it, and then they have to deal with all the ways that she needs to be held accountable for it. So it's very much a book about the unruliness of the body, and like both in terms of sex and violence and desire and doing things you didn't mean to do, wanting things you wish you didn't want, and loving people that you wish you didn't love.
I can't wait for everyone. If you haven't read it already, if you haven't been able to get the galley, it's just thrilling and really powerful.
Yeah, and it's been funny. I feel like people want to read. People have been reading all different kinds of books in the, during their quarantine, and a lot of people have been like asking for the most stressful book with like the most problems in it. They just want to really escape into a good meaty story. So this is perfect for that.
Definitely. And then also has humor as well, though. It's funny, I was talking to the audiobook narrator, Michael Crouch, who read from Michael's perspective, ironically. And he said one of the reasons he loved narrating The Knockout Queen is because it was easy to find the humor in every character. And so it made to him even the most contemptible characters likable, which I thought was such an interesting addition.
Oh, well, I mean, that's absolutely how I feel about it. It was a big, I consciously like pursue humor in my work because I think it levens the extreme amount of melodrama that I'm naturally attracted to. So it allows the whole thing to rise. Yeah,
but it's also really honest, because even at this time, I feel like I've had moments where you feel guilty laughing about something because it's such a difficult and terrible time in so many ways. But then I think that's just the reality, is that that's how we cope, and we need to find humor even in the most difficult of situations. And that's just what makes us human, I think.
Yeah, so true.
And hopefully everyone will follow you on social media. You can see all your handles on there. And as we go, we'll, of course, hear a lot more about the Knockout Queen. And now we're going to hear from Samantha. Please tell us a little bit about your latest Library Reads pick. He started it.
Yes. First, let me say thank you. I'm so honored that both of these books have been on the Library Reads list, and I think that's great. So for all the librarians that voted, thank you so much. The new book is about 3 siblings and 2 of their spouses who have to go on a road trip in order to secure their grandfather's inheritance. And they have to go on a road trip and scatter their grandfather's ashes at the end in a specific place. And this road trip was a road trip they took when they were kids. It's the same road trip, and their grandfather had driven on that particular road trip. So the book has both road trips, flashes back to the one when they were children and the one they're going on now. And there are lots of secrets and lots of grudges and lots of scores to settle. And if you have siblings, try to imagine what it's like to be stuck in a car with them for 2 weeks and on a massive road trip, and there's a whole pot of money on the line. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And if you read My Lovely Wife, you probably have an inkling of where this is going. This is definitely a thriller, and not everybody is honest, shall we say.
I love it. I can't help but wonder where you come up with these ideas.
We presented this book at one of our conferences, and when the cover came up on the big screen, I said, I don't even think you should have to present a book with this cover. It's kind of like one of those like mic drop covers. It's like, it's awesome. It's so compelling.
It's an amazing cover, and both the books have had amazing covers, and they're a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and the books are tongue-in-cheek as well. They're not serious and heavy and depressing and dark. Despite what they're about, there is a tongue-in-cheek element to them. So they are meant to not to depress you or make you think the world is a dark, disturbing place. It's really just my brain.
I love that about these, though, especially. I say as the resident, I think, well, maybe Kelly's with me on this, the resident scaredy cat of the group who's afraid of anything. I like that I can still handle these. I feel like there's that great balance between just an awesome, riveting thriller, but that, keeps you on the edge of your seat, but that I can still sleep at night knowing that I'm not living in the book myself.
Yeah, and they are not graphic in violence. They're not graphic in sex. They're really not. Everything is implied in the book. So from that perspective, they're very clean reads, as they say.
I was trying. It's funny. I was looking and reading through all of your books. I was like, I feel like I've been built up to have props during this session. And I'm like, what can I bring? And so I thought for your book, we have our road trip vehicle. So as we talk. I don't know if this is the exact car.
Knife. I'm glad it's a car.
I know. I was like, I don't want to scare anyone. I won't replicate the cover of My Lovely Wife.
Right.
Well, thank you. We can't wait to hear a little bit more about that book as well. And then last but not least, Ellen,
Hi.
tell us about The Orphan Collector.
Oh boy, I'm glad that Kelly said that people are looking for, meaty books right now, because this is The Orphan Collector. This is my 5th novel, And it's set in Philadelphia during the Spanish flu in 1918. That's the deadly pandemic that infected a third of the world's population and killed about 50 million people worldwide. Then the story follows Pia, who is a young German immigrant. She loses her mother during the pandemic, and then she has to take care of her twin baby brothers until her father returns from the war. But eventually, because she lives in the tenements and they're already really poor, they run out of food, and she has to leave her baby brothers behind to go search the city, the quarantine city, for supplies. But when she comes back, her brothers are gone. And it's also about a woman named Bernice. She's a grieving mother who uses her hatred of immigrants to tear families apart when they're at the most vulnerable. So it's not funny. It's, very familiar during these times. And it comes out from Kensington on July 28th.
So we're going to get into this a little bit with all of you about kind of the timely connections that can be made between material you wrote pre-pandemic and post. But I think up front, we really can't ignore, especially with your book, Ellen, what a timely novel this has turned out to be. It's pretty chilling in a lot of ways.
It is.
And you've done a lot of research.
Yeah, this is what people have been calling reading into the pandemic. And there's books that people have been looking for this reason. So it's empathy. If nothing else, it's a way to work through it. So
exactly. Yeah. I think my publicist has been a little frustrated that it didn't come out earlier so that it could be on those lists, into the pandemic, But
but I mean, it's true. And I think knowing all the research that you must have done for this book, thinking about what's happening today, do you feel like a kind of accidental expert on a lot of what you're hearing in the news?
Because once they started closing down schools and stuff, I thought, this is all too familiar.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But very powerful, like Kelly said, to read it through perspectives that are still taking us out of our own current life and hopefully, escapist in a way that brings empathy to the current situation and makes us understand a little better, but also it's still a novel and that's not really happening.
Help people understand why some of the things that are being done by our government are being done,
Yeah.
I also think I've been finding myself just wanting to read about the Black Plague a lot. And I think it's just comforting to know that this happens periodically and that, like, humanity goes on,
Exactly. Life goes on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's true. This is so easy to just say, well, this is a moment unlike anything we've experienced before. And it's books that really bring us that realization that we're not alone in having to deal with this.
Right. And it helps to see other people made it through those struggles and
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
Well, let's go to the next slide. And we already, I think, got into a latest, I'm confused about my slides. Tell us a little bit about your latest book. We, of course, got into a little bit, but do you want to share a little bit more? Anything that you didn't say up front that now, as we've kind of gone into our chat a little bit, Samantha, do you want to add anything else that you want people to know about He Started It?
Yeah, I think the original idea for this book came from a road trip that a friend of mine was telling me about, and lots of things went wrong on their road trip. Somebody got sick, they had to stop at one of those urgent cares, they had a flat tire, and I just thought, what a perfect setting for a thriller. I needed to write a new book. I didn't have an idea, and I thought, well, I can take that and run with it and give him an even worse road trip. But I had to. One of the things was deciding who would go on the road trip, because originally I was thinking of friends, like college friends, who had got back together for a reason. But once you're out of college and you start a life, it's really hard to go on a 2-week vacation with just your friends. right? You have families, you have spouses, you
Yeah.
have vacation time. So it couldn't be done. I needed to do it with siblings for a family reason. And I didn't want to do a nuclear family because that was what was in My Lovely Wife. So I didn't want to do mother, father, and kids and what have you. So I turned to the siblings. I also have a brother, and if there's anybody that shows up in my book, it's him, and he's in every one of my books.
How does he feel about that?
Oh, he loves it. He loves it. But
yeah,
I
recently went on vacation with my sister and my brother, which was very random, and with one of my sisters and one of my brothers, and it was funny because this sibling dynamic is funny when you revisit it later down the road. And we were driving, and I always thought he drove too fast. It was always like a thing. And he said, I forgot how annoying you were. It's kind of like that. I felt like I was 8 again. I love that you revisited that dynamic.
Siblings have a way, they know exactly how to get to one another, get under somebody's skin. You know all the trigger points. To this day, when my brother and I are in a restaurant together, when he gets up and goes to the restroom or whatever, I always take something. Like if he leaves his sunglasses on the table, I take them. If he leaves his phone on the table, I take it. And then he comes back and, what did you take? And the great thing is just waiting for him to realize it and then being like I can't help it, but I get around him and I'm 12 years old all over again. So
now you've had to come up with new virtual tactics if you've
right.
been FaceTiming with him.
So I think with siblings, there's always that long history. If you grew up in the same house together and were raised together, the history is something you just can't avoid. So I really wanted to dig into that in this book and how they slowly throughout the road trip retreat to their childhood relationship selves.
We did get a question from a lot of the panelists a lot of the attendees are wondering if any of these books or any of your books are appropriate for YA.
My books?
Or anybody.
Everybody. Okay. I think older teenagers would like it, but it is a thriller, so it depends on, but it is not graphic. Like I said, there's no graphic violence, there's no graphic. My Lovely Wife doesn't even have a curse word in it. I mean, it's sex, but there is death. So,
yeah,
I would say older teenagers would be okay with it.
Yeah, the protagonist in mine is 13 when it starts out, and I think it would be appropriate too.
Mine probably would not. I mean, I think that older teenagers would really like it and would relate to a lot of it. But there is swearing and there is sex and there is violence and it's all pretty graphic. So, but I mean,
they would probably love it.
I wouldn't give it to a 12-year-old.
No. But because of the age of your characters as well, I think there is that connection to really relating to what it is to be a teen, but an older teen, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think it also has that, oh my gosh, all the adults are out of control. Like nobody's steering the ship. I feel like orphanhood is a really vital part of children's literature. Like the children suddenly being freed from the adults being in control is part of what allows the plot to happen. And in a weird way, that's true for my characters too. They're like unusually unsupervised. And I feel like that's kind of a wish fulfillment thing for YA.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right.
Well, let's move on to our next slide because I'm very curious to know how this time's affected your own personal reading or writing routines within your homes. Rufi, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, right now is a little bit of an abnormal time because my book is coming out next week. So there's a lot more Zoom events and doing this kind of thing. So I haven't been very productive at all. And honestly, I have no idea. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so they're suddenly home all the time and I'm doing the whole homeschooling situation. And it's gone remarkably well, and they're old enough that they can kind of read a book for a couple hours or do a game or go just like hunt for bugs in the backyard. So it hasn't been as bad, but the main thing I've been feeling is just this crushing desire to read, and especially anything that will take me to another world, you know, anything where I get some, and I think a huge part of it too is that going on social media and the news ratchets up my adrenaline so high now, and that I can't do it right before bed or I won't be able to sleep for hours. So that time where I used to kind of just scroll is suddenly now filled with books again. And it makes me so much happier. I feel like I hope that is one habit that really sticks.
That's great to hear. I like, you know, like we said, hearing the positivity of what can come out of a difficult time. And that's often happened from our connection with books. I've found I've been listening to a lot more audiobooks at night for the same reason, because I feel like that endless scrolling and looking just keeps me awake for longer than it should. And so just being able to like shut my eyes and listen to something has been helpful to me. Ellen, what about you? How has this affected your time?
Well, I'm on deadline again for another book. So, but, you know, even though the Orphan Collector is not coming out until July, I'm still doing a lot of promotion stuff too. And, but reading has actually been easier for me than writing right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it just takes me somewhere else and out of my head, where I spend too much time in my head. But and I've been listening to some audiobooks because I've been signing some tip-in sheets and things like that. So yeah, but writing's a little bit more difficult right now.
And is that's I imagine not the norm for you? Does it usually come much more easily?
Oh well, no, not necessarily. Not really. I don't know.
No.
It is a little bit harder right now for some reason. Too much.
I think what's happening too, we put so much pressure on ourselves. I think so many people feel in this time, because it is a unique time, that like we should be more productive than ever because we're home, if we have that luxury to be able to do that. And I think that can be challenging in itself as well, to feel like you should be writing all the time when that's not realistic, perhaps.
Right. And even though I already work from home, I always think, well, now because I'm home, I have to be home. I have to like go through every cupboard and organize and, you know, start some kind of hobby. And it's like, I don't know why I'm putting that pressure on myself. You know, it's like I have enough to do, you know, because you see everybody on Facebook saying, oh, you know, I tried this new recipe and I organized all my closets. And,
so annoying.
Like, I am so sick of cooking.
Yeah. And like I can barely get my normal stuff done. So.
I know.
I understand. And Samantha, what about you? How do you feel at this time?
I've always had a routine of writing in the morning and reading at night, and going to work at a Monday through Friday job during the week. And now I don't go to work, so I have all this other time in the middle of the day that is turning into a lot of unproductive nothing. And I read more. I get tired, like everyone said, of social media and the online stuff, and shut everything down and read a book. And I'm in editing for the next book right now. But I have tried writing multiple things over this period, and I get to a certain point, and then just even as an exercise, not even that anything would be serious, it just seems to putter out. I don't know, maybe I'm just losing focus or something. But in terms of when I write and edit and when I read, those two things haven't changed. I just have this other time in the middle, and I can't go to the gym, can't go shopping, can't go to a movie, can't do anything. So
yeah.
Well, you can chat with us, so we're thankful you're filling today with this.
and I haven't organized anything, so I'm not one of those people.
Neither have I. Thankfully, this is a very narrow scope that you're all getting into my apartment. I can back up against a bookshelf. Somebody just wrote in, do you find it difficult not to have a division between work, home, and family time? Has that question come up for any of you, thinking about that?
I don't have kids at home,
Yeah.
but I babysit my grandkids a lot, and that's the other thing too, with it being home, and the grandkids are home from school, and they love to FaceTime me. So
I bet.
I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to answer you, even though I'm in the middle of something. So, yeah.
Oh.
I think that a lot of writers are really used to stealing the time to write anyway. And so for me, having littler kids, and I am like working from home, and so it feels very like natural, kind of, the lack of boundaries makes it all the easier to steal the time that I need, kind of.
That's great.
I think it's funny to point out that the very first thing Rufi did say to us this morning was that she was hiding in her son's bedroom, or your son's bedroom, I think you said. But we're all starting to find these places to hide in our house.
Yeah. Or you just kick people out of the house. Like I kicked my son and husband out this morning. Thankfully, it's not storming like it was yesterday here in Brooklyn.
But I will say, I think for the authors, I think it is nice that we have been, I mean, I've worked in publishing for almost my entire life, and people that I have known the whole time have never asked me for books to read. And now I think I've said this to my colleagues, I think I've heard from like everybody I know saying, what should I read? So reading has really become a thing that people are using to escape, and it's really awesome. So, we have to look for the positives, and that's definitely one of them, especially when you love books as much as all of us do. So,
and that's actually a really good segue to our next slide, because like we said up front, it's National Library Week, and this is definitely a different time than we envisioned in terms of how we would be celebrating, but we're thankful for the ways that we have found to connect. And so one of my favorite questions that we actually ask authors a lot when they come into the office or the audiobook studio or an event is if they have a favorite library story or library memory, because I think so many of us really do. And that's why we've ended up in the respective careers that we've ended up in. So I'm really excited to hear from all of you, to hear what your favorite personal library story or memory, or just any anecdote about libraries you would like to share. And just to note on the slide, we asked our fabulous Borrow, Read, Repeat subscribers. We have a patron e-newsletter and website, and we had over 850 responses last week in leading up to this week to tell us just a word that makes them feel, that communicates what libraries mean to them. And it was just such a beautiful collection of words. And Samantha, let's start with you. What's your favorite library story or library memory?
I'm originally from California. I'm not from New Orleans. And every other week on a Thursday night, my mom would take us to the library. And that was the night the library was open late. So that's when we would go get our books. And it was a big, fun event in our house. I mean, that was like really exciting to go to the library and get a whole new stack of books. And life went on. I moved to New Orleans, and Katrina hit, and I was here for Katrina. And once I finally got out of the city, I ended up back in California. It's been 15 years now. My mom did not have a computer. She did not have internet access, and she lived alone, so that she only had the one car, and she would go to work every day. So every day I would walk to the library, the same library I was in as a kid, use their internet. And that's how there were no smartphones back then, just 15 years ago, nothing like that. And so the library became, once again, the place where I went when I needed something. And every day I would walk down there and use their computers to be able to keep in touch with people because I had no other way to do it. So the library has been important to me several times in my life, if only for their resources, whether it be books or whether it be a computer to use. It's been invaluable.
That's such an important reminder. So it's so much more than books to all of us, and that's wonderful. That also reminds me with Katrina to mention. I remember when ALA happened that it was the first big convention, I think, to come back to New Orleans was ALA the year following Katrina, and it was like a real celebration of libraries coming to a city to show their love, and they weren't gonna be stopped. But that's that's a great story. Rufi, I know you had a couple of library stories, but what would you like to share?
Well, I guess that in some ways, because it's a story, it's atypical. It's not that I'm suggesting that every librarian is like this librarian, and yet she became emblematic to me. But she was actually kind of an eccentric figure. So at the time, I was working in the dean's office of the university as like a secretary, and the head librarian came up and said that basically she had broken the copier downstairs, and could she use mine, only could I do it because she had some problem where machines broke around her. And I was like, okay, that's weird. But then like my copier that always worked and was fairly new suddenly was jamming and screeching, these noises. And finally I had to get her to like go out into the hallway, and then I could make her photocopies. It was the oddest thing. Wow. But so through this whole mess, as we were experimenting with it, we were talking, and my grandmother had just been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and I don't know how we even got on to talking about it. But then the next day when I got into work, there was this thick manila envelope on my desk, and inside was all the latest research on congestive heart failure, and like codexed, it's like beautifully indexed with like paragraph summary for what each scientific paper was about. And I guess that instinct to help, to take the book and press it into someone's hands and to give someone the information that they need. She never even asked me if I got it, and she seemed surprised when I went down and thanked her, because that's just what you do. I don't know. And so that is what I think of when I think about libraries and about librarians, is that they're sort of like the no nonsense nurses of human knowledge or something.
I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. We think so much, rightfully so right now, about who the helpers are. And that's a really beautiful example of a librarian being that helper for you at a time when you needed it. Ellen, what about you? What's your story you'd like to share, or memory?
Well, I grew up in 3 Mile Bay, which is like only 200 people. So, and I went to a little one-room schoolhouse. So there was 3 people in my first grade. So there was no library in our town. And even if there had been, my mother was really poor German immigrant that just came over here, and she could hardly speak English. So even if there had been a library, I'm not sure that she would have known to take us there. So I didn't really have access to a library until I went to the big school in the next town, which I think there was 400 people in that town. So, once I got access to it, and it's funny because I was like into reading Stephen King and Dean Koontz and all this other stuff. But I will have to say that ever since I've been published, librarians and libraries have been like my biggest champions. And every library event that I go to is so well attended and so fun. And probably my favorite memory is when we do have a little tiny library, when like half the town came in and crammed into that little library for my first book launch. Like they were like filling the rafters, and it was just like the most amazing thing. And every book since, I have had my launches at that little tiny library, and it's just been great. But I am so grateful for the support from the librarians that I have had so far.
Oh, and we're filling the rafters virtually for all 3 of you today, because I can see we have well over 500 participants. So thanks to all of you for filling those rafters, for staying with us and talking with us this morning. This has been such a joyful, personal way to spend my morning. So thank you to everybody. And please, anyone listening in, if you want to share your own love, of course, you are the librarians that we're also thankful to, but we've shared the hashtags on the bottom of the screen there. And if you want to share more library love with us, because why not? That's how you can do it, and we would love to see it. And the next slide, so we've talked about this a little bit already, and Ellen, I'm going to start with you just out of, I think, the most kind of obvious connection, but I know all 3 of you really must have some thoughts about, you wrote your books at a time pre-pandemic. You've all worked on them for a long time, presumably. And how is this moment making you reflect differently on the work you've written, and then also the lens through which readers or listeners will be experiencing the stories?
You want to start with me?
Yeah, I mean, especially because, I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, the first line of your book is, "The deadly virus stole unnoticed through the crowded cobblestone streets of Philadelphia on a sunny September day." Yeah. So that's chilling, I think, at any moment, but especially now. So do you want to talk about how you're reflecting on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I never in a million years imagined that I would be living through something so similar. And I think that it's easy for us to like look back and say, well, that was 100 years ago, and people weren't as well informed or well prepared, and even the doctors didn't, understand as much as they do now. And especially when I was doing the research, people used to they tie garlic around their necks to ward off the flu, or take sugar cubes soaked in kerosene, or they would take formaldehyde tablets and morphine, and they drank lots of whiskey because they thought that whiskey was going to ward away the flu. And the Board of Health recommended everybody eat more onions and keep their windows open and things like that. So when you're reading that, you think, oh, well, that's why it happened. They didn't know what they were doing. But at the same time, they did the exact same things that we are doing now. They closed the schools, they closed everything down. And at first people were complaining, and the newspapers were in uproar because the sporting events were being canceled and stuff like that. But as the death toll rose, as more people died, people got so afraid they wouldn't even speak to each other. They would like now it's so great to see everybody helping each other. Back then, like, people wouldn't answer their doors, and some people like even starved to death because they had nothing, and no one were brave enough to give them food. But the interesting thing is that, and also, back then, just like now, that's what we're trying to avoid now, is the hospitals being overrun. Because back then they did get overrun, and they had to turn people away. And one of the thing that inspired me to write the story was, Philadelphia was the hardest hit city in the United States. And because the hospitals were turning people away, the Visiting Nurse Society used to visit people in their homes, and sometimes they'd find, everybody deceased, or they'd find the parents dead, and or orphans, they're orphans now, sitting there starving, that been left there. And so that's what they're trying to avoid now, by flattening the curve so that the healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed. And but it's interesting to note that the cities back then, like St. Louis, had the biggest restrictions, and Philadelphia had the less. And St. Louis had the least amount of deaths. So I think it's really, we need to pay attention to what worked in the past, and because I think that that's the only thing that's going to really save us right now. So yeah, it's a really surreal, bizarre thing, because I lived through writing that book for 2 years, and now I'm actually living through something that's so similar,
Very eerie.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And Samantha, you mentioned you have you mentioned quarantine, but not in a serious sense in your book. But I don't know if you want to speak to that particular instance, or just generally speaking, how this moment's making you reflect on your work and how people will take it in.
I think the line you're talking about was a line I had forgotten about, but a bookstagrammer saw it who had a review copy of it, and there's a line in there where one of the siblings says something about, it's like we're quarantined in this motel room, and because they're stuck together. So I think it's actually an interesting book for thinking about it in this time, because they really are. They're stuck together and for 2 weeks. And if they want to collect their money, they have to do this. So I think there's a lot of people out there who might be stuck with family members that they didn't wish they had to see for 24 hours a day, every day. that can drive people crazy. And it is for a limited amount of time. And so is this. We know this is not turning into dystopia. This is not the apocalypse. The world is not collapsing. It is horrible and it is terrible, but it is not going to wipe out the human race and make us all savages in the streets or whatever happens in the apocalypse. So it is a limited time that this will happen, whether it's 6 months or a year. It's still limited. And so I think in that respect, I think people, these are not the greatest people in the world in my book either. So you might read it and think, thank God I'm in my family and not this family. I make
That's
you
a
feel
good point.
better about your own family and be grateful that you're not hanging out with these siblings.
Right.
I think it's a nice moment. I think that your book is kind of like going to give people that like lighthearted sense of like, what can I learn about myself being stuck home with my family for these, every experience in life is meant to teach you something. And this one, obviously, if people are not using this as a moment to learn something about themselves and their family dynamic, they're like missing the point, I think. So that's funny. I like the way that you said that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't make people paranoid, like, what are they hiding from me?
It might.
And Rufi, what about you?
Well, so I guess that since my book doesn't have any more direct tie-in, but what I was thinking about was just the way that this is going to affect the generation of kids coming up in this. With my kids, like especially my 7-year-old is scared. And so the line that I've taken has really been like, it is scary and you don't have to worry about it because the grown-ups are going to take care of it and we can take care of it. So your perceptions are right. It is true. It's real. It's big. It's scary, but you're safe because we're going to deal with it. But I think that when you become a teenager, a lot of times, so originally when I started writing this book, I had imagined that it would be kind of happening in the present day. And then as I realized that I needed to follow them more until they were older, until they were in their like late 20s, early 30s, I realized that I had to make them born earlier so that they could get older without going into the future, as it were.
Right.
So they wound up being about 5 years younger than me. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about the generational differences and talking, to like my little cousins and stuff and trying to understand what seemed so different about the world to them than to me. And I think they really have only ever been in a world that was at war. Like they don't have any memories pre 9/11. And they had just like this incredible cynicism about those people in power caring about them at all. And so that the idea that like you don't have to be scared because the grown-ups are in charge, like it's just gone. It's just not there for them. Yeah. And so I sort of tried to bring that in with my characters, and they're really, especially Michael is so angry, especially about like the wealth and the way that his town is being gentrified, and he wants to burn the whole place down. He never would, although there is arson later. But I do think that like this is one of those moments where we say, what kind of people do we want to be? How do we make this a world that our kids can believe in? How do we show them what is the best in us? And so I've been thinking a lot about that.
I love that. That's a really beautiful takeaway, I think, because what really struck me too, going back to your book, that the now moment is bringing up for me is that class discrepancy and like who pays the price for mistakes that are made. Because even just in the very beginning, when you point out, whether the president at the time had any consequences for what mistakes he made versus Michael's own mother. and the difference between normal people versus those in power, I feel like takes on a different resonance even now in this moment we're living, which is really powerful. So like you said, even though it's not maybe as obvious a connection to like what's happening in the present moment, I think it's still there because of the journey through the past few decades that we take with these characters leading up to now. It's really interesting looking at all of your work. So I think, you know, it's not a bad thing that I think that readers and listeners in this moment taking in your amazing novels will have that added layer, as difficult as this time is. I think it's really powerful to think about.
It makes me wonder what storytellers and historians are going to say about this time. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Someday somebody's going to be writing a novel about this, you know?
Yeah.
So I wonder what they say.
That makes me wonder, and this wasn't a planned question, but do any of you think you're going to be writing about this moment, or it's too soon to say, perhaps?
Well, what I related to for us is Katrina, because everything changed after Katrina, and everybody in New Orleans, our lives are before Katrina and after Katrina, and that's how we talk about it, because it changed so much. Nobody here will read a Katrina book. Nobody will watch a Katrina movie. Nobody wants anything to do with that time anymore. Yeah. So for the first 2 years, it dominated your whole life of how you were recovering and where you were going to live. And once we moved on, nobody wants anything to do with it. So it'll be interesting to see with an event like this where so many people will change jobs and think after the recovery starts to happen, and people will not be able to finish school or be able to finish school or have to go to college online or whatever. Yeah. Are they really going to want to talk about it 10 years from now? Are they going to, it might be interesting 50 years from now for the people that didn't experience it, but that's all I can relate it to is really nobody here would want anything to do with Katrina fictionalized or even a documentary. Nobody would do it. So it's an interesting way to, I don't know if the same thing will happen or not.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and that makes sense to me.
I know I don't ever want to talk about it again after it's over. Well, I will say though that our Penguin Random House as a company has launched this. I guess you'd call it a hashtag, but more of a place to talk about books, and their hashtag is Books Connect Us. And even just listening to the way you guys answered this question, even though all three of your books are so different, every book really does connect to your own life. And it really is true that books really are like the best way to connect people to an emotion or a story or a problem or whatever. So that was very interesting to listen to how differently all three of you felt with all different kinds of books. And that was great.
Yeah.
Well, back to something that you said about people not wanting to talk about Katrina. 1918 is called the Year of Forgotten Death because people didn't want to talk about it. They just wanted it to go away. Wow. They wanted Spanish flu to go away. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It could be something like you writing 100 years later, writing a story about it, and but not something that's going to happen in 3 years.
Right.
Yeah. I think as I think about it, I do feel though like it's going to always be a point of reference that I'm going to think about when I'm creating a character is, all right, well, how old were they during that period and what was their experience like? And I mean, I see it in my kids, like they're not going to most of second grade, like they're going to be different for having done schoolwork at home with me. Like my boys are becoming better friends because they have no choice. If they're going to play with somebody, it's going to be each other. So they have to set aside their petty grievances and find a way to have fun. And that's going to change their relationship for their whole lives. And so in a way, I feel like it's going to wind up being in every book because it's one of those really formative things, events that you kind of you can't write a world where it didn't happen.
That's really interesting. That's true.
Very true.
So Samantha, your siblings would have taken a very, perhaps even more unique road trip down the line after this time together. And speaking of time,
we are gonna be a world of germaphobes after this, though.
That's true. Well, so the next slide then is my pop quiz. I couldn't leave you guys out. We've been doing a pop quiz every week, and this has made me think about a question that we asked all of our lovely viewers last week. Was if you could have dinner with any author, living or dead, who would you want to have over? Virtually, I guess, or otherwise, but who would you like to have dinner with? Ellen, let's start with you.
Well, this is probably just, a common answer, but it has to be Stephen King.
I mean, why not?
I devoured his book. Like, I was 14 when I read Salem's Lot when it came out, and I can still remember, that one sentence that made me gasp and
What was it? Can you say it?
I can't remember it exactly, but it's when the light turned on at the Marston house.
Okay.
Read that book? No. So
I'm the resident scaredy cat of the group.
I'm not. I that's my favorite. And so I have a bunch like I think this might be like the first edition of his.
Oh wow.
Salem's Lot and Carrie and all that stuff. And I just want to pick his brain and listen. He's crazy.
Love it.
And Rufi, how about you? Who would you want to have dinner with?
I'm really torn because there's whether to choose someone whose writing I admire so that I could sort of like grill them, or someone who I think would just be a real good time. So
make it a dinner party. Invite them both.
Yeah, invite them both. Well, so I mean, I guess writer-wise, I would choose Jane Smiley. I'm such a fan, and I think she would just be really interesting to talk to. Her interests are so far-ranging, and she's just got such a mind. I would love to get to meet her. But I think that I might have the most fun with Samantha Irby. I don't.
Oh, yeah. She's actually we did a Library Week podcast this week with This Is the Author, because she came in recently to narrate her own audiobook. So we asked her the question we asked you guys of why she loves libraries. And so she's in that episode this week. But I think she would definitely be a lot of fun. Yeah. And Samantha, what about you?
I would have to say I have to pick one living and one dead. I would say Patricia Highsmith because of her talented Mr. Ripley series and writing from a villain's point of view, or turning a villain into the protagonist or the hero or the anti-hero. And living, I would say Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. I actually would love to talk to her about, she's written some very interesting essays and articles in magazines and newspapers about feminism and the role of women in fiction, and what they have to be versus what they can be versus what they're supposed to be, and I struggle with that a lot, of people's expectations of what women should be versus how you want to write them.
Right, the whole likable narrator.
What people will accept from women.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and just to know, there are a lot of comments coming in that all three of you, people want to have dinner with all of you. So you might have some invitations coming in post-pandemic. And I wanted to share on the next slide. So these were the answers that our lovely viewers and attendees wrote in. So you could see the most popular one: J.K. Rowling, Neil Gaiman, Jane Austen, Dorothy Parker. She was my answer last week. Jason Reynolds, who I adore, but this was a lot of fun to see everybody's answers. So we'll have to add all of yours to the cloud and see how it changes. But thank you for indulging me in my pop quiz. I know, like, Rufi, you're already homeschooling, so you probably didn't want to test, but I think it was a pretty easy one. And that makes me think about what we should ask next week, right, Kelly?
That's right. Here we go. Ready?
Here we go. So we want to know, because I think we really need this right now, what book or audiobook makes you the happiest? So we hope that all of you listening in, thank you, by the way, for listening in today. Please share your answer with us, PRH Morning Buzz. And then we started a new little hashtag, Sunshine Stories, because we think we all need a little sunshine through these times, and I'm so curious to hear. Do any of you want to share? Can you off the top of your head, do you have an answer for this question that you want to share? No pressure.
I kind of do.
When you asked this last week, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, when you asked this last week, I was trying to think of the answer, and I actually thought it would be like Pride and Prejudice, but it's that book, the Dr. Seuss book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. That was my boys' favorite book, and they used to read it to each other. So every time I think about that book, it actually does make me actually happy. So I like that you asked this question because it made me want to think about this. Yeah.
I mean, I realize we can't be sunshine and rainbows all the time, but we can certainly try our best. Do any of you want to share? Rufi, you have an answer?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure it's like the right kind of answer, but it's what I immediately thought of is like my comforting book, like the books that I go to when I kind of just want to feel safe is, for whatever reason, the Sookie Stackhouse mysteries. And audiobooks of those are really good. And there's something about, Sookie's like, I'm just trying to make my grand proud, but like dealing with the vampires, I find it very comforting.
Oh, those vampires are so,
Oh, yeah.
That's a great answer, though. And before we go, Ellen or Samantha, do you want to chime in with yours? Or you could think about it and tell us later.
Yeah, I don't really read a lot of happy books. I like drama.
But what makes you the happiest? Like Rufi said, it doesn't have to be the obvious.
Oh, what makes? Well, I actually.
Stephen King.
That makes me happy. I'm sorry.
We get it.
I would say I love the detective series, the Number One Ladies Detective.
Yeah.
I love that series, and I think it's fun, but it's still sort of in that mystery genre, so it fits well. Those are always fun books to read and not dark or depressing.
I love that. Well, thanks for indulging me, and thanks to all of you out there. Please share. We want to hear what your sunshine stories are, and this has been so much fun. Can I say that? I really loved meeting all of you virtually. This has been so wonderful to hear more about your books, which we all love so much. And thank you for giving us insight and, during this strange time, talking a little bit more about, your process and letting the librarians know why these are so vital to their collections, because I really think that everybody needs these books for different reasons. And so we're so appreciative.
Can I just say that my publicist wants everyone to know that even though she can't mail out ARCs right now, that she will as soon as the mailroom reopens and she can get to it. But this is her. I didn't know if I should set it on a chat.
We can send it out. We can send it out.
Hold it up a little longer. Let everyone have a chance to write it down. Don't be shy.
No, that's okay. We can put it in the wrap-up notes. It's okay.
Or
and
that.
We can send it out, too. Okay. Yeah, we got it. We got it covered.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And then, of course, for Rufi and Samantha's books, you can also email us at penguinrandomhouse.com if you have questions about how to get ARCs of that.
It was so nice talking to you guys this morning. Thank you so much for joining us from all over the country.
Having us.
Thank you so much.
And stay tuned. One final note, happy National Library Week. We have fabulous quotes from all three of these lovely authors that will be creating additional quote cards this week to share. So you have that to share with your patrons as well on your social media. So look for those later this week, and also an archive of this interview. And be sure to sign up next week. We'll have more books, coffee, and hopefully lots of fun.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Be well.